everyone. Welcome back to the Minute Women podcast. My name is Grace.
And I'm Linnea.
Happy 30th episode, Linnea.
Da, 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 da. This is our 30th episode. That's wild.
We'd like to thank our haters. We'd like to thank all of our supporters.
Yes, we'd like to thank our Instagram fans, the contacts we've made off Twitter,
our moms,
your dad,
too much.
your dad for sharing our Facebook posts. Yeah, I was with my parents this weekend and my sister, who's 11 years old, and I was like, well, my mom listens to every episode, but she does it when she's like cleaning the house or something, so she doesn't really listen. I was like, yeah, let's listen to an episode. I was like, we'll listen to the newest episode, because in my head it was really funny.
We do curse a lot in that one.
And I particularly swore a lot. And so then I put on the Jackie Robinson one, and it was so funny because my stepdad, he does not swear. He solely says, like, he doesn't even say God. He only says gosh. Oh. And it's funny because he loves sports, especially baseball, and he played for a long time. And I knew that he would listen to the Jackie Robinson episode. Mm-hmm. So I think in the back of my mind, because there's this one point where I go, oh my gosh, or something. Like I didn't say, or no, it was holy crap, I think. Oh. I was like, holy crap. And like I could have said like holy, and it was funny because we're in the car and we're listening to it, and I was like, holy, and then everybody like stopped.
Everyone clutches
and then
their
I was
pearls.
fine. And Peyton goes, you knew Daddy was going to listen to this episode, didn't you? And I was like, yeah, I did. But yeah, 30 episodes, that's wild. There's been ups and downs and laughter and tears, and I can't wait for the next 30.
I know. It's crazy to think that we've gone through 30 of them already.
Yeah.
And like, to think where we started out and where we are now, the passage of time, things happening,
a quarantine, global pandemic.
When we started this podcast, there was no like pandemic or quarantine or anything like that. And I'm really, if anything, I'm just really proud that we managed to sustain this through all of that.
Oh yeah,
regardless of circumstances. So
exactly,
that means a lot. It means a lot that people kept listening, even though like there were some sound quality issues and like technical things that we had to kind of go through.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening.
We appreciate it more than you know.
Yeah. But let's roll into our 30th episode.
Let's roll. Grace just did some like finger lasers.
Finger guns.
It was really nice.
So for our 30th episode, we have to do a big one. We're going to do Louis Riel.
Okay, I'm excited.
Which is the most traumatizing one to watch.
Traumatic. Let me tell you. I don't know. For those of you who haven't seen it, Louis Riel, actually, we will do a live watch of this.
Oh, we will.
We will do a live watch of this this week when the episode comes out, because it's dramatic.
It's dramatic. It's traumatic.
It's traumatic. It is, as a child, having this on like during normal television.
I know.
Yeah, it's definitely. Let's get into it, because I don't know. I think I talked about this in another podcast episode. Like, I don't know much about Louis Riel, aside from the fact that like what I know from a like social studies textbook in like junior high. Like, it's not.
Yeah, and I don't think the Minute does a great job of conveying, because it's just his execution. So you see him get hanged, and you see his final kind of prayer essentially to God, which does convey like a reality that he was a very religious person. And at the end, there's a voiceover that says, he was like a hero of the Métis people, but you don't know why. It doesn't really talk about like, why did they need a hero?
And,
like,
and
why did they need someone to defend their rights?
That's what I know. I know that he was like French and Métis, and he was hung.
And hanged.
Hanged. Is that how we say it?
Yes. So we don't say someone is hung, because that means
he's got a large
something
penis.
else.
Yeah.
We say someone is hanged. When you are killed by hanging, you are hanged.
You are hanged.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now that that's all clear.
Just sort that out, because that's not what we're going to get into today.
Louis Riel, let me tell you, he was hanged.
Anyways, so Louis Riel was born on October 22nd, 1844 in the Red River Settlement, which is now the basis of like Manitoba.
Okay.
And I believe it's near
We're covering
Winnipeg.
the prairie ones recently.
I know. I was just thinking
we did
that.
Saudi and now Louis Riel, Winnipeg, or Manitoba. You said Manitoba.
Manitoba. These are like the quintessential prairie ones. So he's
To
the
our
eldest of
fans.
11 children.
Did you say 11?
Yeah, he's the oldest of 11. They're Catholics. That's what they do. They have like a bunch of kids. But of course, he's the oldest. Like when it's big families like that, it's always like the oldest or the youngest.
Yeah,
you know?
those middle ones, I bet he doesn't, I bet he didn't even know their names.
No, he's just like Tommy and Tommy and Tommy and Tommy and Tommy and Louie
Sarah,
and me.
And Louie and me.
It's like, do you listen to the podcast Mabim Bam or like my brother and me? It'd be like my brother, 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 and me.
Yeah.
So his father's name is Louis and his mother's name is Julie. And the Riel family was very close-knit, devoutly religious, and very affectionate. So they're a very close family.
Very affectionate.
So Louis was a Métis person, his heritage being largely French and Indigenous. And in particular, he inherited his paternal grandmother's Indigenous heritage. She was Franco-Chippewa Métis.
Okay.
Louis was exposed to politics at a very early age. His father, Louis Sr., was an educated man who had obtained land on the Red River, where he gained a position of influence in the Métis community.
Okay.
In 1849, Louis organized the Métis community, so his father organized them to help Pierre Guimont Sayer, who was a Métis charged with violating the Hudson's Bay Company's trade monopoly. Sayer was released, an action which resulted in the end of that monopoly. And so as a child, young Louis heard a lot about his father's political engagements and how he was a leader in the community.
That's cool. Good role models.
Good role models.
Affectionate family, good role models. This is all
present dad.
Yeah, present father.
The dad's around.
This is sounding positive. Things are sounding good.
So Louis began attending Catholic school in St. Boniface, where he attracted the attention of the Bishop Alexandre Antonin Taché, who thought he had lots of potential. The bishop was
The bishop thinks he has potential. This kid is going places.
Yeah, the bishop was like, you know what? We need these bright Métis boys like Louis to be trained for the priesthood. So maybe it's not the attention you want, but like he's like, you could be a priest.
Yeah.
And Louis like, great, I'd love to be a priest.
I'm Catholic. What more could I want?
What more could I want other than like a wife and family or whatever?
Yeah, like 80 kids.
Yeah. So Taché arranged to send Louis and 3 others to Canada in 1858. So Canada right now would refer to what is now Ontario and Quebec. The nation of Canada does not exist.
He's in Manitoba at this time.
So right now that's all called Rupert's Land.
Right.
It's owned by the Hudson's Bay Company.
So, but he's in North America.
He is in North America, yeah. So when he's 13 years old, he goes to the Petit Séminaire de Montréal, and Riel showed himself to be intelligent and studious, as well as very charming. But on a bad day, Louis was moody, proud, and irritable, which I love because it's like a Taurus on a good day is intelligent, studious, and charming, but on a bad day can be moody, proud, and irritable.
Yeah,
This could be cause for concern.
Is he a Taurus?
I don't know. He's born in October, so no, he'd be like
Capricorn?
Libra?
Oh,
Or
Libra.
Sagittarius, maybe? No, not Sagittarius.
I'm not good at the signs.
I don't know. Call in.
Libra.
Let us know.
Yeah,
I think
us
he's
know.
a cusp sign, though, because he's on the 22nd. So
Oh,
that
yeah,
would be
that
like
would be cuspy.
the change. You're so cuspy.
Cuspy.
I think he's Libra.
I'm cuspy, so like I know.
Louis Riel is such a Libra. I hate that we've brought up, I think, astrology twice now in 2 episodes. Did we talk about it in the last episode, maybe?
I think it was cut. I think our wonderful producer cut that bit out. He might
Don't cut it this time,
He might
Mark.
cut this one. You never know.
So in February of 1864, word reached Louis that his father had passed away.
Oh.
So this was a real shock to the 20-year-old. Louis had always been a bit of an introvert and probably suffered from some kind of depression, but now he seemed to have lost all confidence, especially in his qualifications for the priesthood, and he withdrew from college in March of the following year without graduating.
Oh no.
So he's taking the loss of his father very hard.
Sad.
Which is, like, I feel like that's not a perspective you get very much in history.
No, and it's
people
quite
are like, death, it happens.
It's quite normal. And I mean,
Yeah.
20, at that time, that's like a lot of time with your dad. That's a lifetime.
It's like you've become an adult under your father. Yeah.
That's pretty big. Like, what, Dad's probably, like, in his 40s? Like, that's decent at that time.
So I guess it was just a shock. And so he's not taking it very well.
Sad.
So he leaves in hope of supporting his family in Red River, whom his father had left kind of impoverished and in debt. So the family's not in great financial circumstances.
Oh, no.
And so Louis became a clerk in a Montreal law firm.
Okay.
But the subtleties of law bored and annoyed Louis, and he decided, in all likelihood, in 1866 to return to Red River. So we don't know when exactly he decided he was going to go back, but like probably in 1866.
Okay.
And then he also probably worked a number of odd jobs in Chicago and St. Paul, Minnesota, before he eventually arrived in St. Boniface in July of 1868.
And St. Boniface is in...
So that would be... I think it's near the border, but it's in what would today be Manitoba.
Okay.
But it's all like Rupert's Land or the American territories.
Right.
So his story is very like he crosses the border a lot, and sometimes it's just for casual things like, oh, I'm going to work odd jobs in Chicago.
Yeah.
Whatever. So the Red River that Louis left behind some 10 years earlier was not the one he returned to.
Okay.
As a child, Red River was an isolated society of English-speaking biracial peoples, Scottish settlers, and French-speaking Roman Catholic Métis. The Métis were the largest group and developed a strong sense of national identity based on their blend of French and Indigenous cultures. For the most part, the Métis preferred hunting buffalo to farming. The annual hunts were superbly organized and disciplined affairs under the control of a democratically elected leaders, and the Métis' adherence to the hunt was dramatically reflected in their quasi-military social organization. So this is the community that Louis is familiar with, but when he comes back, he finds that there's now these deep-seated religious aversions that had become notable to the settlement. So now there's like a lot of uncertainty and volatile political climate.
Yeah.
Essentially, the Protestants and the Catholics are not getting along.
Not at all.
And that's causing a lot of
Such is history.
Such is history. The settlement, which was part of Rupert's Land and held by the Hudson's Bay Company, was still administered by a governor and the Council of the Assiniboine, established by the Hudson's Bay Company. The need for a new constitutional arrangement was acknowledged, but the issue was far from settled. So people are now like, okay, the current governmental structure that we have in place isn't good enough, and it's not reflecting what the people need. And I think it's partly just due to the population influx.
Right.
Like, it's easier to manage a really small community, but it's growing a lot.
And rapidly. It's changing.
Yeah, just to like 10 years.
Yep.
Moreover, the old inhabitants now recognized that their settlement was still isolated. It was the object of expansionist aspirations on the part of the United States and Canada. So they're also recognizing, like, if we don't establish ourselves, then Canada or the United States, one of them, is just going to consume our community.
Yeah.
Indeed, during Louis' absence, the settlement had grown to almost 12,000 people, and the village of Winnipeg had also emerged, largely populated by Canadians and a handful of Americans.
Right.
In fact, what Louis found at Red River in July of 1868 was an Anglo-Protestant Ontario community hostile to Roman Catholicism and the social and economic values of the Métis. So he left when the Métis were really the dominant culture, and now he's come back. And while I don't think they're necessarily outnumbered, they're not in positions of power.
Yeah, he's feeling a little bit ostracized in that community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the figurehead of this new Red River was a guy by the name of Dr. John Christian Schultz, who was an Ontario-born physician, trader, and land speculator.
That's a wide variety of interests.
When no one's checking, you can say whatever, you can be whatever you want.
He's a doctor.
I'm a doctor,
Air
and a
quotes.
Trader, and a land speculator.
Yeah, okay.
And his goal is to annex Red River into Canada. So he wants, like, Rupert's Land generally to be purchased by Canada and become part of Canada.
Right.
So annexation had been something he had been promoting personally since the 1850s. So even before the Dominion of Canada, he's like, we should annex into those two.
We should do this.
Those two places,
Yeah.
Lower and Upper Canada, because they have responsible government. That'd be great. We should be a part of it.
Yeah.
Shortly after Louis' return to the West, it became known that Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, fearing the Minnesota annexationists, so there's a group from Minnesota that's like, we could have it.
They have a name.
Minnesota.
In Minnesota.
Minnesota. Would you like...
They're
Minnesota
not German.
Vikings.
They're not Swedish.
It's kind of a Swedish accent.
New man on the Minnesota Vikings.
I can't hear the name Minnesota Vikings anymore without...
Little Lizzo.
With a little bit of Lizzo
God,
in my
I love
heart.
her.
Me too.
Who knew on the Louis Riel episode we talk about Lizzo?
It was inevitable.
Yeah.
This is now a Lizzo podcast.
Yeah.
It's not a math podcast. It's not a science podcast.
Nope.
It's not even a Heritage Minute podcast
It's
anymore.
a Lizzo podcast.
It's a Lizzo podcast.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I'm fine with that change.
So John A. Macdonald is fearing that the Minnesota annexationists, and he's negotiating with the Hudson's Bay Company to transfer Rupert's Land into Canada, ignoring the population at Red River and the Council of the Assiniboine. So these two parties are like, we do not want that. We don't want to be part of Canada. And he was just like, that's funny. That's cute.
That's a good joke.
You think you have rights.
Silly.
You silly goose. So concurrently, the prairies are suffering from the grasshopper plague of 1867 and 1868.
Oh.
Which, so funny.
Okay.
It's not funny. It's actually horrible. But if you want to learn more about the grasshopper plague, go listen to The Dollop. They do an episode on it. I'm trying to think what that episode is called, but it's kind of like a recent episode. And essentially it's just like when they talk about in the Bible of like a plague of locusts, and it's happening right now again in parts of Africa, I believe in Ethiopia. It's like that. Like it happened in the prairies. So it's just this cloud of grasshoppers or locusts
my God.
that just land and eat everything. Like it's
why?
Because that's what they're evolutionarily designed to do. And so
that sounds awful.
The Canadian government had proposed providing relief by financing the building of a road from Upper Fort Garry, which is now Winnipeg, to Lake of the Woods, which is just the best town, Lake of the Woods. But, under the veil of this is providing just benevolent relief to these starving people, these kinds of works of public infrastructure also help with annexation because you can transport people there.
Yep.
The project was poorly planned, however, particularly that none of the organizers spoke French, whereas the majority of people around you are speaking French. Rather than bringing some French speakers to communicate with the locals,
No, they would never do that.
Charles Mayer, the paymaster of the project, wrote very critically of the Métis in Ontario newspaper articles and encouraged Ontario migration westward. So he's like, instead of talking to you, what if I really passive-aggressively got a bunch of people from Ontario to move here instead so I don't have to talk to you?
I think that's a great plan.
Poor communication.
I hate that guy.
We were having a conversation earlier about how sometimes we can both be very psycho.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Charles Mayer is doing the exact same thing.
We're crazy girls. We make up ideas in our heads.
I can convince myself of anything.
Oh, 100%.
Especially someone hating me.
100%. I often think Grace is mad at me. And in reality, I don't know if Grace has ever really been mad at me.
No, I'll get random texts that are just like, are you upset with me? I'm like, no. I don't want you to think that.
I'm crazy. No. You don't want to be my girlfriend.
But I'm the exact same way. And Charles Mayer is doing the same thing. Rather than just working on communication, he's deciding to just be like, but what if I moved thousands of people instead?
Yeah.
So the work crew was increasingly hostile to the local Métis as well. So it's just following the example
naturally.
Set. Yeah, it's just the paymaster is being really rude and doesn't like the Métis. We don't have to like them either.
Exactly.
For example, Thomas Scott, an Irishman and a fervent Orangeman, was reckless, stubborn, and contemptuous to the Métis, and he joined the work crew in the summer of 1869.
Sounds like a jerk.
Total jerk.
Yeah.
And Orangemen are these really... it's like a fraternal lodge. Yeah, they're very xenophobic to immigrants.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah,
That's a bad club.
They're not great.
Let's disband that club.
At Saint Vital, Louis was initially content to wait for his time to come into the public discourse. So he's like, I'm just going to bide my time. However, when he read Mair's articles, Louis defended the Métis against this unjust criticism in a reply published in Le Nouveau Monde, which is a Montreal newspaper, in February of 1869.
The news of the world? The new world? The new
world.
Yeah.
He attended and spoke at a meeting called on the 19th of July by well-established leaders of the Métis community, such as Pascal Breland and William Deese, to discuss growing Métis fears about the course of events. Though the meeting underlined the need for concerted action, nothing was planned at the time. But there's rumblings. Something's gonna go down.
Something's coming.
Something's happening.
It's coming, kids.
Métis suspicions grew in July of 1869 when William McDougall, one of the leaders of the Clear Grits, so they were a political party, ordered a survey of the Red River settlement. So now, it's not even acquired by Canada yet, but the Canadian Parliament's like, let's do a survey.
Let's just, check it out.
Let's figure out who's living there and, find out everything about the land.
Let's send some people down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The head of the survey party was Colonel John Stoughton Dennis. Or Denny. Stoughton.
That's a name.
And he was given specific instructions to respect the river lots of the settlers. So it's like, that's their land.
Yeah.
Nevertheless.
Don't mess with him. Oh, what did he do?
Well, nevertheless, he received a very cool reception when he arrived at Upper Fort Garry and St. Boniface after he arrived on the 20th of August. And
what is a cool reception?
Yeah. Well, I am assuming that they gave him a bit of a cold shoulder because they don't trust him.
Did they talk to him or did they throw their fresh produce at him? How cold are we talking?
Rotten produce.
Yeah, rotten produce.
I think it's just very chilled. They're not being cooperative.
Right.
But this kind of cold shoulder brings him into even closer association with Dr. Schultz, who then increases his fears of the Métis people.
Of course.
And then Métis people are like, oh, that's bad. Now he's talking to the head guy who wants to get rid of us.
Naturally.
Bad communication. Despite concerns being raised by influential men with knowledge of the situation in Red River, these were ignored in favor of annexation. The lands of the Hudson's Bay Company were transferred to Canada on the 1st of December, 1869, and McDougall was made the lieutenant governor.
Canada.
I'm learning. And he was probably the worst pick for the job.
Oh, great.
To him, that just signals to the Métis, oh, you don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Sorry for the cursing.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize.
The Métis knew they needed a strong leader in the face of this new political reality. Louis' experience leading up to this point made him an excellent candidate.
This reality.
This will be our last episode of the Minute Women podcast. We apologize.
Oh, that was just asking to happen.
Yeah, it was inevitable. So Louis is ambitious. He's well educated. He's bilingual, young, and energetic. He's eloquent, deeply religious, and the bearer of a famous name. So he's really the perfect package.
Yeah.
And most importantly, he is ready and willing to lead this movement.
Yeah.
He's this is my time. So on October 11th, a group of Métis, including Louis, stopped the Red River survey, and a week later, they formed a national committee.
Ooh.
On the so this is the start of the Red River resistance.
He's
the Red River Rebellion.
Moves.
He's not just going to sit on his hands. He's ready. On the 25th of October, Louis was summoned to appear before the Council of the Assiniboine to explain his actions. He declared that the National Committee would prevent the entry of McDougall or any other governor unless the union with Canada was based on negotiations with the Métis and with the population in general.
Okay.
So that's their mission, is that I think they understand that union with either Canada or the United States is inevitable at this point.
They just want to say.
But yeah, they're we have a list of demands and we will be heard.
That's fair.
This did not stop McDougall from reaching the border of the village in Pembina and proceeding to the Hudson's Bay Company Pembina post.
Okay.
So he's
whatever.
I'm just going to keep going. Here, on November 2nd, McDougall was met by an armed Métis patrol and ordered to return to the United States.
Oh my gosh.
At the same time, Louis, with 400 followers, took possession of Upper Fort Garry without a struggle. November of 1869 was intense for the Métis. Louis invited English-speaking inhabitants to elect 12 representatives from their parishes to attend a convention with the Métis representatives, and on the 1st of December, he proposed to this convention a list of rights to be demanded as condition of union.
Okay.
So on the same day as Canada acquires Rupert's Land,
right,
they are going to present these kind of demands, their petition. Much of the settlement came to accept the Métis point of view, but there was a passionate pro-Canadian minority that began organizing in opposition, comprising of men like Schultz and McDougall.
Okay.
So for the most part, people within the community are like, either they don't care, or they're like, yeah, it's fine. I'd like to be heard.
Yeah.
But there is a minority group that happens to be very influential and powerful.
Okay.
And they're just like, union with Canada at any cost.
Right.
This pro-Canadian minority was then imprisoned on December 7th.
Okay.
So Louis and his crew, his gang,
merry band of men,
they're like, we know who's part of this, and we're gonna collect them and imprison them.
Wow.
Yeah. It's getting intense. It's getting heated.
That is heated.
On December 8th, Louis established the Provisional government under the leadership of President John Bruce. So now Red River Settlement is like, we have like our own president, we have our own provisional government. Like, this is a full-on rebellion resistance situation on our hands, which is super cool. And like, I know people know what the Red River Rebellion is. Like, I think people have heard of it, but it's like super interesting.
This
is
interesting. This is like Star Wars stuff up in here. Rebellions.
The creation of Canada was not peaceful.
No. No.
Very violent. John A. Macdonald later admitted that under the circumstances, the people of the community had to form a government for the protection of their life and property.
Yeah.
So in retrospect, he's like, oh yeah, that's fine. It was good that they did that. But yet, in an alcoholic haze or because of urgent political problems in Canada, he did not, in fact, fully realize at the time the state of affairs in the settlement, and Canadians generally seemed unconcerned.
Is that, like, quoted from somewhere, an alcoholic haze?
Yeah.
I love that. That's like, if someone asks me, like, oh, like, you said this to me, or you, like, sent this text message, I'll be like, Linnea was in an alcoholic haze.
At the time?
Yeah.
I was in a alcoholic haze. I like when you speak about your drunk self, it's in the third person.
Oh, always.
It's like, oh, Linnea was in an alcoholic haze.
She's a different girl.
It's a different beast.
That one.
So hearing of the unrest, Ottawa sent 3 emissaries to Red River, including the Hudson's Bay Company representative, Donald Alexander Smith.
Okay.
Meetings with Louis and the Ottawa delegation took place on the 5th and 6th of January, 1870. Okay. When these proved fruitless, Smith chose to present his case in a public forum.
Yeah.
Smith assured large audiences of the government's goodwill in meetings on the 19th and 20th of January, leading Louis to propose the formation of a new convention split evenly between French and English settlers to consider Smith's instructions. Uh-huh. So, there's some olive branches going back and forth. We still have our guys imprisoned.
Right.
There's still some hostilities, but
of course
we're talking.
Yep.
On the 7th of February, a new list of rights was presented to the Ottawa delegation, and Smith and Louis agreed to send representatives to Ottawa to engage in direct negotiations on that basis. Mm-hmm. The socialist provisional government established by Louis Riel published its own newspaper titled New Nation. Mm. So like Le Nouveau Monde, and now we have New Nation.
Oh, I like that.
There's connections. And
in your face.
And they established the Legislative Assembly of Assiniboia to pass laws.
Wow, they're getting official.
It's a government. Like, they have their own government. They're just like, this is how it's going to work.
Yeah.
The Legislative Assembly of Assiniboia was the first elected government at the Red River Settlement and functioned from the 9th of March to the 24th of June, 1870.
Wow.
The Assembly had 28 elected representatives, including a president, Louis Riel, an executive council, which is like their government cabinet, an adjunct general, which would be like chief of military staff, chief justice, and clerk. So it's a full-on parliament.
This is wild.
Yeah, it's just like no one here, like we don't talk about it, I think, especially in Eastern Canada. We're just like, and then they expanded west.
Also, that's just like so organized in such a short period of time. Like,
I know,
I feel like governments can't do that now.
I know.
Like, this is just, they were just like, oh, like you're going to do this job and you're going to do this job. And then everybody's going to like work together and it's going to be a democratic government and we're going to fight against what we don't like.
Yeah. And
and they just did it.
It's so in line with things that are happening more globally. Like last week we talked a little bit about just like how the 1800s are really, really interesting and there's a lot of revolutions. Yep. Like there's a model that they're working from and you can see like connections to the French Revolution and stuff. It's super cool to me.
For
Grace, a nerd.
I'm learning to love history.
Oh,
I am.
That makes me really happy.
Oh.
That makes me really happy.
Oh, it makes me happy to understand why things are the way they are.
Oh,
I like it. Good. Thanks, Grace.
It makes me feel like I'm not keeping you hostage.
You're not. Never.
So despite the apparent progress on the political front, the Canadian Party continued to plot against the provisional government. Schultz, Mair, and Thomas Scott were determined to instigate civil war to eliminate Métis power. Mm-hmm. However, as outsiders, they misjudged the willingness of the country-born and Scottish settlers to oppose the Métis, which is ultimately like, they're not Métis people, but most of the time people just don't want to like mess up the status quo. Yeah. And they're like, everything was fine. I don't know why we're fighting all the time all of a sudden.
I don't know why we're so angry.
Yeah. And they don't really feel this allegiance to Canada or Ontario. Right. They're just like, everything was fine until you guys showed up. Right. Like, why would I fight for you? Right. I don't feel this like allegiance to either like Protestant kind of sentiments or like English language. Yeah. Unfortunately, for all concerned, the three men had escaped from Upper Fort Garry Horse in January of 1870. So the people that they had imprisoned, Schultz, Mair, and Thomas Scott, they managed to escape in January.
Oh, no.
Schultz had made his way downstream to drum up support for an armed force. So now he's in the U.S. Mair and Scott had gone to Portage-la-Prairie, a Canadian settlement, to gain support as well.
So they just escaped from prison and then just, like, moved on with their lives?
Well, they're going elsewhere to, like, get militias and come back and take Fort Garry Horse.
Right, okay.
Or Fort Garry. I always want to say Fort Garry Horse because that was the name of the military group that we talk about in the Winnie the Pooh episode.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first time I had ever heard of it called that. So I was like, funny. Fort Garry Horse. That's not the name of the place. Anyways, funny. Upper Fort Garry.
Yes.
So Scott retailed horror stories of his imprisonment. At Portage, a force was assembled with the objective of joining Schultz's party in what's now part of Winnipeg. The ostensible reason for action was to free the Canadian prisoners that were left behind at Fort Garry.
Okay.
So that's what they're saying their objective is. It's not to overthrow the government. It's to free political prisoners.
Right.
The last prisoners were released on the 15th of February, but this really didn't have an effect on Schultz, Mair, and Scott because their real purpose is to overthrow the provisional government. The
Casual. Overthrow the government.
Oh, you know, a coup. What are your plans for this weekend? I think I might topple a government.
Oh.
Does that sound good?
Can I join?
Yeah, we can get brunch afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So they're going to attack, but then the Portage party decides that they're going to return home. Okay. So I don't know exactly, like, if they were just like, we're going to wait for another day, or they're, like, losing support. So they're just kind of like, it's not worth our time.
Yeah.
But they marched a body close to Fort Garry instead of dispersing to make their way west. Okay. So news of the expedition had caused intense excitement in Fort Garry, and every available man was called to defend the fort. So you're, like, walking close enough to the fort that they're like, hey, you think you should be concerned about those guys with guns?
And they're like, yeah, start the phone tree.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, get the bugles. Yeah. When the armed Portage party approached the fort on the 17th of February, a small force of some 50 men arrested the 48 Canadians, including Thomas Scott, and took them into the recently vacated cells in Fort Garry. Schultz, realizing that he's now a marked man, left for Ontario.
Yeah.
So they're like, we're going to arrest you even though you're not attacking. But it's because they were gonna.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring you into the prisons.
Duh.
We just released all the prisoners you wanted us to release. But now you're, I guess, going to still attack us. So we're going to put you guys in prison.
Let's go to jail now.
So Louis correctly believed that it was the Canadians who were responsible for the turbulence in the settlement.
Okay.
They had twice resorted to force to try and overthrow him.
Right. One
of them needed to be punished, and Charles Bolton, the militia captain, was condemned to death. So there's a trial, and he's condemned to death.
Whoa, this is big stuff.
This is what happens when there are revolutions and coups and stuff.
I like it.
Ooh. Anyways.
Did you know coups are also cows?
What?
There's a type of cow called a coo. They're the ones that have, like, bangs in their face. Like, they've got the hair all over them. They're really cute.
Guys, this stuff is fun, but I thought we were doing cows. I thought this was a cow weekend.
When you said coos, I thought we were going to be talking about the cow.
I thought this was going to be a cow thing. I don't know how to fire a gun. I think I have to go home. I don't think I'll cut out for this.
Can we get back to the farm?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I told them. I thought I was coming to hang out with you. I know it. There were guns. My best friend, the cow.
Okay.
Anyways, so, not the coup we're talking about.
Condemned to death. Dun, 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 dun. Okay.
Murder. We're getting back on our murder shit for episode 30. So Charles Bolton, militia captain for the Canadians, he's been condemned to death. A number of people appealed for clemency, so they don't want him to be killed. And Louis only relented when he obtained a promise from Smith to persuade the English parishes to elect representatives, which means they're legitimizing the provisional government. It's like, we won't kill this guy, but you have to legitimize.
You have to play our game.
Yeah, you have to legitimize what we're doing.
You have to play along.
So now Bolton's been pardoned.
Okay.
Thomas Scott, regarding the pardon as a sign of weakness, proceeded to insult his Métis guards. So he's in prison. He's insulting his guards, who became so angry that they would have given him a severe beating had Louis not intervened. So Louis like, okay, like, I know this guy's super annoying, but like, it's a really bad look if you beat this guy up.
Yeah, don't do it.
And he warned Scott, like, you have to behave.
Please.
Like, please. Just, like, please stop. An ignorant and bigoted young man with a profound contempt for all mixed bloods, quote unquote.
Oh, God.
Scott thought that the Métis were cowards. He was just like, they pardoned this guy. I can do whatever I want because they're not going to do anything about it.
No.
When he continued to make difficulties, the guards insisted that he would be tried by court-martial, and he was charged with insubordination.
Oh, jeepers.
And Scott was then sentenced to death. So it's literally like, this guy is so annoying that he's sentenced to death. On this occasion, the appeals of Smith and others were firmly rejected by Louis. So he's like, this time, no. He said,
I warned you. I asked you nicely.
It's like, I already played the game. So as he said, quote, I have done 3 good things since I have commenced. So commenced the provincial government.
Yeah.
I have spared Bolton's life at your insistence.
Yeah.
I pardoned Gaddy, who was another Canadian. And now I will shoot Scott. Those are the 3 good things that he's done. I'm like, ooh, that's a good quote. Ooh. Whether he was worried by the signs of insubordination among his followers, whether he persuaded himself that the settlement was in danger, or whether he just thought it was necessary to intimidate the Canadian conspirators and show Canada that the Métis and their government should be taken seriously, will always be debated. So we don't know exactly why he chose to do this.
Right.
But Scott was executed by firing squad on March 4th, 1870.
How'd they do it? Firing squad. I think I'd rather that than hanging.
Yeah, it's definitely faster.
Honest.
It's definitely more. Do you know why they do firing squads?
No.
So, so you can't commit murder, but firing squad, you don't know who killed him.
Who shot you.
Yeah. So morally and from like a legal code standpoint, you can't say which person killed him.
Interesting.
Which is definitely like an old style of law, and by today's standards, you know, if both you and your friends shoot a guy, you don't get off scot-free. But it is from, I think it's, I don't know if it has kind of its seat in religion or if it's just more a more archaic form of legal code. But yeah.
Well, and I don't know for sure, but I know I read at some point that there's some states, I believe, that have the death penalty where you can choose what you want still today.
Like nation states or the United States?
I think in the United States.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think there are a few select states of the United States where you could, because in Canada we don't have the death penalty at all. But in America there are still several states that do. And I think that you can choose. Most people just go with
lethal injection.
Lethal injection.
I've heard scary things about
I've also heard scary
though.
things. Most people just go with lethal injection because it just like puts you to sleep, and then it's like when you put down a dog. Like it's pretty much the same process.
Yeah.
Whereas you can actually choose in some places, I think, to still have the chair or still have like firing squad or hanging.
Interesting.
If you choose.
I know in France, the last time someone was guillotined was the same year that Star Wars: A New Hope came out. Like the 70s was the last time someone was guillotined.
I don't like that. That's not nice to think about.
But it's interesting because like
guillotine.
When the guillotine came out, that was like the most humane way of killing someone. It was just like, it's so much more humane than hanging someone, which I think it is. In some ways, it's just extremely graphic.
It's sudden. Yeah, it's done. Like, and it's like firing squad. It's like,
and you don't mess it up. It's really hard to mess up a guillotine because you just set it up and you pull like a lever. Oof. Yeah. I'm trying to. French Revolution's super cool. Anyways, murder. State-sanctioned murder.
So death by firing squad. He's dead.
By firing squad. Thomas Scott, most annoying man in all of the West, is dead.
Dead.
In the settlement, the death of Scott was soon forgotten. So like within Red River, it's just like, okay, we killed a political prisoner. That happens. But in Ontario, this was like, this murder, quote unquote, was a huge issue. Right. And so Scott becomes this figurehead for a pro-Canadian movement. Protestant Canada took notice, they swore revenge, and they set up a Canada First movement to mobilize their anger, which is like literally Canada's MAGA.
Right.
It's just this nationalist, expansionist, colonial movement of white people.
Right.
The movement secured the editorial support of most Toronto newspapers.
Interesting.
So that's the other like line that you tread, is that Ontario is very anti-Riel and Quebec is very pro-Riel.
Right.
Purely based on religion and language.
Right.
Because he has access to the French language newspapers, whereas a lot of the Canada First people don't.
Yeah.
They also planned meetings to be addressed by Schultz and Mayer throughout the province. The appeal was anti-French, it was anti-Catholic, and to some extent anti-MacDonald for receiving a delegation representing the murderers of the, quote, heroic Thomas Scott.
Okay.
So...
who was actually just a wiener.
Yeah, it's not that, like, I think he deserved to die.
That's a better word, wanker.
He's a wanker.
He's a whiny little wanker.
It's not that I think Thomas Scott deserved to die, it's just that, like...
But that's follow through.
He's not the hero you want.
Yeah.
He's not the hero you think he is.
No, and it was also
make him out to be one.
Government follow through. Like, you did this, and I let you, like, off, and I told you what you had to do. All you had to do was just shut your mouth, and you couldn't do that. And so to, like, show my people that I'm governing, that this is legit, and this is how stuff works, like...
Yeah.
That was the natural progress of things, and you just couldn't keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, and he's like, I've been giving you rope and rope and rope and rope, and now my followers are starting to question my leadership because I'm being so lenient. And it's like, and now, no more.
We're done.
So the delegates representing the provisional government departed for Ottawa in March. Okay. Although they initially were met with legal difficulties arising from the execution of Scott, they soon entered into direct talks with MacDonald and Georges-Étienne Cartier, who will do an episode at some point, because I'm pretty sure he has a Heritage Minute.
Yeah, he does.
I think so. An agreement enshrining the demands in lists of rights was quickly reached, and this formed the basis for the Manitoba Act on the 12th of May, 1870, which formally admitted Manitoba into the Canadian Confederation.
Okay.
Provincial status was granted to Manitoba, which was the name that Louis favored, so he wanted to call it Manitoba.
Big deal.
although MacDonald and Cartier succeeded in limiting the size of the province to just about 1,000 square miles and not the entire Northwest. So if you look at the first maps with Manitoba, it's just this dinky little square.
Oh, really?
Even though Manitoba, I think, is like the third largest province now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Something like
maybe
that.
fourth. But yeah, it's just this tiny little square. And it's literally just like Red River and like Winnipeg. It's this tiny little thing. Provincial control of natural resources, including all lands, was denied. But after hard bargaining, 1,400,000 acres in the Northwest were set aside for the Métis as a compromise.
Cool.
Bilingualism was recognized in the proceedings of the court, the legislature, and in government publications. However, the negotiators could not secure a general amnesty for the provincial government.
This all sounds promising, though.
Yeah, so like he's achieving a lot of what he wanted to achieve.
Right.
But the government's like, you're still revolutionaries, and we're never going to be able to give you amnesty. Like, we're never just going to be able to brush this under the rug.
Right.
The pro-Canada movement's never going to let us do that. Throughout the negotiations and in the early summer, Louis had grown uneasy about the deterioration of his support.
Okay.
Some Métis, mostly established farmers and traders, had never actually accepted his leadership and regarded him as an upstart.
Yeah.
Another group, whom Professor William Morton notes, quote, alternately supported and then opposed him.
Okay.
So it's not fully like all Métis people support Louis Riel.
Right.
This was a St. Boniface elite whose members are to be distinguished from the hunters and unemployed tripmen, among whom Louis drew his strongest support.
Okay.
So he gets most support from like the lower classes.
Right.
At the same time, Louis was concerned about the weakening of the always fragile relationship between the French and the English-speaking settlers within the settlement.
Right.
So there's also a lot of factors that are creating uncertainty for him.
Yeah.
As a means of exercising Canadian authority in the settlement and dissuading American expansionists, a Canadian military expedition under Colonel Garnet Wolseley was dispatched to Red River. The arrival of the expedition on the 20th of August marked the effective end of the Red River resistance.
Okay.
Although the government described it as an errand of peace, on the 24th of August, Louis learned that soldiers were planning to lynch him.
Oh, God.
So you have provincial status now,
right?
And you have this provincial government in place. I believe that the provisional government just hadn't been reelected yet.
Yeah.
But Louis is like, I don't have any protections.
Right.
So anything could happen to me.
Right.
Without amnesty, he vacated Upper Fort Garry a few hours ahead of them. Oh. Quote, no matter what happens now, the rights of the Métis are assured by the Manitoba Bill. It is what I wanted. My mission is finished. Louis then proceeded to his home in nearby St. Vital, where his mother lived, but growing more apprehensive about his safety, he took refuge at St. Joseph's Mission, which was about 10 miles south of the Dakota border.
Okay.
And Louis Riel is now officially in exile.
Oh, no.
And that is officially the end of part 1 of the Louis Riel episode. There was just too much.
Grace.
Like, that is the dumbed down version of everything that happened.
Can't do me like that. Me and the listeners.
Yeah, so for 30th episode,
we're
going to do a part 2 on Louis
Riel.
Riel.
Oh my gosh, this is a lot.
So we'll pick up with him in exile and his eventual
He's all
return.
alone.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of that, like, that story is like, oh, that's why he's so important to the Métis, but it doesn't explain why he's hanged.
No.
So it's all very exciting.
Oh my goodness. I did not think you were gonna like end there.
I thought it was a good place to finish off his
Yeah.
exile. Yeah.
Whew.
So essentially he's like, even though he's achieved what he wants to achieve, he can't have any security in Canada. And so he leaves. He flees to the United States. And now he's like he's a political exile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm excited.
Everyone will have to tune in next week.
Yes.
For when we drop the second half on Louis Riel.
Yeah.
Cool dude.
Cool guy.
Cool guy.
In exile right now.
In exile.
What happens next? I don't know. Grace does, but
I mean, we
don't.
know he dies.
Yeah.
But that's all we got.
But eventually.
It gets wacky. The back half.
Worse.
The back half gets weird.
Wacky, weird, and worse.
the Minute Women podcast.
Yep. All right. Well, that was great. You're great.
You're great. Happy 30th episode.
Happy 30th episode, buddy. Yeah, so if you aren't already following us on all our social media channels, what are you doing with your life?
Seriously.
We are on Instagram at Minute Women Podcast and Facebook by the same name. And then we are on Twitter, the tweeter, at the Minute Women. Just at the Minute Women.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nailed it.
And then we also have a really beautiful, great website, which has all of our episodes and information about Grace and I and the podcast in general and links to all the social media sites I told you about. And that's at www.minutewomenpodcast.ca. So please check it out.
Yeah, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and you can turn on notifications and auto-download our episodes so you never miss out on anything. You want to stay tuned for next week because you got to know how this Louis Riel epic ends.
I need to know.
I mean, you could just go on Wikipedia, but why would you want to do that when you can listen to us talk about it? Make sure that you review the podcast if that is something that is available to you on your platform. I'm talking to you, Apple Podcast users. Thank you to everybody who has left a review. But it would mean a lot if you would just take 5 seconds to give us like a star rating and then leave us a little review and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thanks so much.
See you next week.
Bye.